Well, good morning, everyone. Hope this finds you safe and well. This is definitely unique and different times, and we as an industry and association are definitely being nimble and adapting, trying to stay out there in front of the news and everything that's happening. Joined here today, I'm Scott Merritt, Executive Director with FLTA. I want to thank y'all for joining us. I'm joined by our President, Nancy Baumann. Say hi, Nancy.
Hello, everyone.
Nancy is out of St. Petersburg and with Sun Title Insurance Agency. Got Melissa Murphy with the fund. And Melissa is active board member, has been very involved in our remote online notary process. And so during the presentation, she's going to hit some of the highlights of what's going on at the state level and the application process. So I know that there's a lot of interest and a lot of questions regarding Ron. So we're excited to have Melissa join us. And we are also joined by Mr. Lynn Prescott, First American Title. Lynn is our Insurers Section Chair. And so we're excited to have him. And along next to Lynn is Marty Solomon. Marty, with Auerbach Cone, is our Agent Section Chair. And so together we wanted to kind of bring the information, like I was saying, there's a lot of things happening, a lot of things coming from different angles. Obviously, yesterday, the Safer at Home Act being passed by Governor DeSantis has brought on additional questions. And so we kind of wanted to just highlight where we've been, how did we get here, and then a couple other things of Q&A. Obviously, you have a lot of questions. Honest to goodness, we don't have all the answers. We've tried to develop some things and get an understanding of what's going on in the trenches, what you're experiencing. And so that's what kind of brings us here. This is for you. And so we'll get started. So today we're going to go over some quick links of where we can find various information and sources. We've got some at FLTA. We'll highlight a couple other associations where some of that news can be found that we have found to be a little bit more sound. Industry status updates on essential business. Obviously, this is a common term that we've heard the past couple of weeks. What is essential business? Where do we fit? How do we fall into that? The latest news out of the weekend, the Small Business Administration SBA disaster program and the CARES Act. How do the agents, small businesses apply for those? And that process, Nancy, I think you have a personal experience, so you're going to highlight that. We talked about the remote online notary. Melissa's going to hit on. And then the adapting of business procedures. How are we interacting with our clients? How are we engaging our allied industry partners? What does that look like? And some of those things. And so that'll lead us into that roundtable conversation. If you have questions, use the question panel in your GoToWebinar tab. Put them in there if you would like. Depending on it, we could bring you up on screen even. That's going to create some of its own challenges, as we have about 300 participants so far. So again, thank y'all for taking the time, and let's get started on some of these things. So new to the FLTA site, we do have flta.org/coronavirus. On here, you will find various web links for a quick resource of where to go and find certain things. ALTA, American Land Title Association, has put together a very good website, so I wanted to put that one there and up front first. And then you have tracking Florida county by county emergency orders. I'll go on that for a second. But in short order, you can see that the FLTA site has various links that you might find useful in your area, and especially in your counties and regions of what's going on. Now, yesterday's state order the safer at home order is a superseding order of prior counties, with the exception of the ones that are in South Florida, where the governor had enacted his own emergency orders or executive orders for those regions: Miami-Dade, Broward, in that order. So want to be sure we
Scott, this
yes.
list is so important for our members and going to Alta, because one of the unfortunate effects and challenges of this time is the cyber fraudsters are taking advantage.
Yeah.
So they're trying to bait us by having fake websites and fake information, knowing everybody is both information overload and also in need of finding out the most current information. And so by going to only the trusted places, you're going to be very careful to protect your computer systems and your clients' information.
Yeah, actually, you were segue for a quick second, but yesterday on the cybersecurity call, it was highlighted on the various platforms that businesses are utilizing and stuff, and even as much as they're for business operations, I guess with so many schools utilizing technology and this and that, there's been people will hack into the sites or whatever, and it's because people are putting them out there for public access when they post it on their social media and everything. And so we'll kind of get into it in the practices at the end, but that two-factor authentication is so important and everything. So that was one of the avenues that they were hitting on. So we'll add some of those items to that site. It's a great recommendation, Lynn. I mentioned the Alta site. Again, good information, really good background on the coronavirus and everything that kind of involves it from an industry standpoint on the national level. Be sure to check out their site. And then the county emergency orders. Depending on where you are, you will want to visit this site. They are listing, and you can obviously see Alachua there, all of the emergency orders for the counties, and the counties only, as this is the Institute for County Government. But all of them there for your reading and knowledge, interpretation. Again, the State Safer at Home Act from yesterday supersedes several of these, but it's still good info because you will want to follow those actions as necessary. I understand some agencies, although I don't believe it's been required in Florida, is that a lot of businesses are handing out letters. Lynn, I think you shared yours yesterday that you have it there?
Absolutely.
There you go.
I do. What we're talking about here is obviously with the executive orders and the different iterations of stay at home, and recognize this is a very dynamic situation. So things, you read, you think you know what's going on, and then a week later, things change again. So while it's not necessary at the moment that we have documentation that suggests that we are part of the essential services that would allow us, those of us that are still making it to production offices or to meet with clients out of the home, but it's a good idea to have something with you, something that is formal. First American has put this little handy, wallet-size piece of paper together that just says, I work for First American, and that it's a bank holding company with insurance and a provider of services to the financial institutions. That's one of the exceptions.
Yeah, short and sweet. We did send out an email earlier this week, and I'll put it on this site as well. Another member offered to share their letter, so we'll put that up there. You can make it your own and everything too, if you feel like that would bring added comfort to your employees and your team.
Had anybody stopped in Florida yet, but they have been doing it out in California. So there are other areas where this documentation has proved important.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point where the stay in place versus safer at home is and all those leniencies and understandings as well. So we're not there yet. Don't know that we will get there, but if we do, it's better to have something ahead of time, at least drafted.
It gives everybody, just another level of comfort.
Right. So essential businesses, obviously, this is what these letters are exemplifying for us and for our team members and everything. About 2 weeks ago when this all started, we as a trade association and in concert with the Florida Realtors and the Florida Home Builders Association, we sent a joint letter to the governor requesting consideration for title settlement services to be considered an essential business. Now, CISA is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. On the federal level, they determine who essential businesses are as a recommendation. Now, obviously, there's a number of fields that fall into this document. In fact, it is in the handout section on your panel if you want to peruse it, actually along with the executive order from yesterday, which also includes this. But obviously, financial services here, the first slide or bullet point, workers who are needed to provide, process, maintain systems, and goes on to say financial transaction services, including payment, clearing, and settlement, wholesale funding, insurance services. So from the beginning, the federal administration has had title as a essential business, which has been good for us from the get-go. The Department of the Treasury, Secretary Mnuchin, followed the CISA guidelines and put his own letter emphasizing the importance of title settlement and financial services as essential businesses. So those two things were very big for us as an industry. Then last weekend, I believe it was Saturday, CISA comes out with a revised list of guidelines. And this is very important, where they added other community or government-based operations and essential functions to the list. And on the very bottom, you see staff at government offices who perform title search and recording services in support of mortgage and real estate services and transactions. I think it goes without saying, I think you agree, that that alone is a very big move for us. We know that we have 57 counties in Florida that already utilize e-recording, but having that there as a guideline is big. And not only that, because the governor's order yesterday specifically links to the CISA document rather than putting out his own list is huge for us. So I think that brings us a little bit of comfort for the time being. Now, hour to hour, day to day, anything can change. But for right now, I see a couple of y'all nodding. I think this is very, very good for us. So from here, Nancy, if you would like, will you tell us a little bit about the SBA disaster program? What was your experience and everything? What's your takeaways?
Yes, I did this week about this program, and there's two that I want to talk about: the CARES Act, and then this program is called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And they're both SBA programs. They're both 100% federally backed. And on this one, you go to the site, where we gave you the link. You have to fill out a application, but it's a very simple application. It took me almost all day to get this uploaded and done. But what takes the time is start looking for IRS tax returns now. They will accept 2018 if you have not filed 2019 yet, which that's what I did. And then some other forms listed in the application, but you have to get that uploaded or your application won't even be looked at. That's what the rules say. And I sent it in Sunday. I have not heard back, and that's the scary part. You're just going to have to believe in the system and see where you go. But this will give you a $10,000 advance loan quickly. It's supposed to be, I think, 3 days after your successful application has been approved. And then it depends on your situation. You can borrow up to $2 million on this for the big agencies. But it's just to give you working capital to pay your bills, to pay your employees, to keep everybody on. And if you do this, I think maybe the other one is 8 weeks. But if you don't lay any people off, this will be forgiven. The grant, it will be totally forgiven. So, but, and that's unless they change the rules, that's what it is now. And then the other one is the CARES Act.
Okay.
And it stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. This is through your bank. Call your bankers. I talked to mine yesterday, and he sent me the application. It's the same application as for the other disaster loan, but it just has different, you have to have payroll, get your payroll ready to send in for a year, so 2019. You can call your payroll companies and go online usually, so you don't have to worry about going back to the office to find this information. And this will be also forgiven if you do not lay any people off. You keep paying them.
Right.
This will be a quicker. I don't think it's going to be as much money, but it's quick. And my banker is like, you get me the information, I'll put you in the queue and let's go. So that's all I have to say about that.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nancy. And, thanks for sharing your experience. Was there any hiccups in the process or anything, or was it, as these things happen, I'm seeing as we, as a family, our children are home, we're dragging down our Wi-Fi bandwidth and everything. Platforms are seeing such high demand. Was there any slowness in getting the application process, or was it? There
wasn't Sunday, but that was one of the first few days. A lot of people didn't even know about this. I heard about it by watching the Today Show, and I never watched the Today Show. Usually, I'm on my way to work. So I got right on it, and we uploaded it very quickly. So, but the more, like Scott, that's a good point. There's going to be millions of people applying for these, and that's another reason to get your application going now. You don't want to be number 10,000 and looking at these applications.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you. I'm seeing a couple of questions on the slides and everything. Majority of these links are available at flta.org/coronavirus. So, especially this document on the slide from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce highlighting the CARES Act. So.
Oh, that's a good point, Scott. Your Chamber of Commerce. Pinellas County had a webinar yesterday. It was very good. So call the Chamber, and they will help you any way they can. And they have programs that I didn't even know about. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
All right. Scott, one of the other questions that we saw was back on the topic of essential services, and they wanted to know whether realtors are essential in Florida. They're not, apparently, up in North Carolina.
Right.
And, that's really going to be for each business operator to decide for themselves. They've got to analyze this and decide. There were a lot of questions whether remote notaries would be essential in different places, and each company is looking at it. Of course, everybody will have their opinions, but each business has to decide for themselves whether they're essential.
Right. Yeah, and then another question, actually, I think, Lynn, from one of your team members is, what are the staff, or who are the staff at government offices who perform closings and searches? How does that cover title insurance companies and agents? Keep in mind that's a general term on a federal level, that states and counties operate independently when it comes to that. So talk to your underwriter about that.
Well, Scott, I've got some news on that. I mean, maybe we're skipping ahead because I know talking about adapting to the new reality, but obviously everyone's concerned about the gap, both in terms of, being able to search as close as possible to a real estate settlement and being able to record after you're done with that settlement. And the good news for everybody in Florida is every single county continues to be willing and able to record. They've also confirmed that they are willing and able to continue to index. In fact, one of the silver linings, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, is as far as the e-recording counties, many of them have actually gotten more efficient as they perhaps set more personnel or more priority on doing the electronic recording while they're not accepting in person.
Right. If you're ready, can you share some of the information here about Ron? I'm gonna swap it over right now.
You need to make me a presenter. Before I move to Ron, there is a specific listing in CISA's order that establishes residential and commercial real estate services, including settlement services, as an essential business. So we're in pretty good shape.
Excellent.
All right.
All right.
So are you all seeing the correct screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Yes.
All right. So what I'm going to talk about today is a very quick update on what's going on with the processing of applications for online notaries. And let me first report that the Department of State says that as of today, there are 818 people who have been officially registered as online notaries in Florida. And that number is going up every single day. And while we all would love an exclusive market on being Florida online notaries, the more Florida online notaries that are registered, the better off our industry is. So we encourage people to apply when appropriate for them. They also report that the turnaround time is about 3 days. So that's pretty darn good, in my opinion, for them to be processing these applications so quickly. So with that, let's talk some specifics. And I've got to figure out how to get to my control. Hang on.
Adapting to new processes.
Really?
Yes. Oh, now you lost it, right?
No, it's still
Well,
there.
we still see it, but it's on the first
There we
page.
go. Okay. All right. First of all, you have to be an existing notary public, and you can be a Florida civil law notary or a commissioner of deeds, but most of the people out there on the phone, you have to start out by being a regular notary public. You have to submit a registration form to the Department of State. And by the way, I'm going to go into more detail about each of these stages here in my presentation. There's a whopping $10 registration fee. You have to tell them what RON service provider you are going to be using. More about that in a minute. You've got to do that 2-hour class in order to learn all about your duties and obligations as an online notary. More about that also. And then we're going to talk about your bond, and we're going to talk about your E&O insurance. All of this we will cover in more detail. So step 1, and I'm talking fast here because Scott only gave me 15 minutes.
You're good.
Step 1, you got to be an existing Florida notary public. I call that you got to be a regular notary. Okay, so you got to start out doing that. Step 2, take the required 2-hour class. FLTA, in conjunction with the Real Property, Probate, and Trust Law section of the Florida Bar, developed the very first course that was approved and posted on the state's website. There are other courses now, but of course ours is probably the best. There's a link to that course in your materials, but it's also on the FLTA website. Once you complete the course, you got to take the quiz, 10 questions. It's a combination of true and false and multiple choice. You got to pass 8 of the questions. Then you get a certificate. Print the certificate out because you're going to have to submit that with your application to the state. We charge $20 for the course, and it all goes to FLTA. So it's for a good cause. All right. What does the course cover? We tried to make this course as informative as possible, but focusing on the duties and obligations that a notary needs to know about. We don't cover the whole law.
We don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't think your slides, if you're advancing your slides, we're not seeing the advancement. It's on the first one.
Oh.
We see the update on Ron.
For a while, it seemed
You
right.
just see the first.
Yeah, the first one that says
you're
very first page.
There you go.
You got it.
all right. Sorry. My slides were brilliant too. I'm really sorry you missed them.
They are.
So here's what the course covers. We tried to focus on what your obligations are as a notary. So we talk about some definitions because it's important. We changed some definitions in the notary law, and you need to know what those are. We review the qualifications and requirements, which I've already gone over with you. We talk about the technology behind remote online notarization here in Florida and cover the requirements that our statute sets out for that technology, because there's some very strict technology requirements that have to be met by the technology platforms in order for you to properly conduct an online notarization here in Florida. And those involve, very importantly, how we require that the notary confirm the identity of the principal. The principal is the term we use for the person signing. We cover the duties that you have as an online notary, because it involves making sure that the session is recorded, making sure that that is saved. We go into all of the details about what your duties are. We also explain and make very clear what the new requirements are for notarial certificates in Florida, both for acknowledgments on real estate documents, but also the jurat form for affidavits. Because it's essential that the notarial certificates now indicate whether the notarization has taken place in the physical presence of the notary or online. There are also some very detailed specific requirements for the notary to supervise the witnessing of documents. And we also talk about the special circumstances with certain types of documents where those rules are even more complicated. And then we talk some about document management. So it's a great course. Even if you don't intend to become an online notary, it's not a bad review of what's expected of an online notary in Florida. Okay, now I'm trying to advance to the next slide. Working.
Whoops.
You got it.
Nope. Nope.
Nope.
Enter.
Yeah. Wait for it.
Ah, there we go.
There we
You
go.
see becoming a non, okay, step 3, contact your existing notary bonding company. Here's the deal with the bond. It's got to be a $25,000 bond. You cannot take your existing $7,500 bond and just buy another $12,500. You have to get a separate $25,000 bond. So don't send in 2 separate bonds. You have to send in 1 bond. The other thing you need is an E&O policy in the minimum amount of $25,000. If you are going to use your existing business E&O insurance, you need to make sure that you send in with your application not only the deck page that shows the amount of the coverage, but shows that your activities as an online notary are covered by the policy. That has been one of the bases on which your many applications have been rejected by the Department of State. And so this is something that you need to make sure you get set up and ready to go before you send in your application. So $25,000 bond, send 1 bond, E&O insurance. Make sure you send the state enough information that they can show you're covered for $25,000 for online notarial services. Step 4, indicate who your RON service provider is going to be. On the application, it says, I'm going to use the following RON service provider. A whole bunch of people apparently just said yes. Well, they rejected that application because you have to identify who your RON service provider is going to be. I've got some names up there on the screen. This doesn't mean that FLTA is endorsing or recommending these platforms. Those are just very common platforms that are active in the market right now. So that's what we mean by identifying your RON service provider. There are more platforms coming on the market. That is great. Underwriters are testing them out to make sure that they comply with Florida law, but we need some more platforms in the marketplace so that there's enough bandwidth for everybody. Step number 5, provide a copy of your existing notarial commission, that piece of paper that you got in the mail with your confirmation that you had been appointed, that you probably stuck in a file or drawer somewhere. You got to find that thing because you have to send a copy of that with your application to the state. A screenshot of the state's website that shows you're a notary in Florida is not sufficient, and this has been a very common basis for applications to be rejected by the Department of State. So you've got to find that original notarial, that commission certificate.
Melissa,
Then,
if I may, I'd like to go back to one of your comments you made about the new providers that may be coming. It is great that there'll be more bandwidth for RON providers, but I want all of our members to know they've also got to be careful, because the act of RON notarization, the recording that needs to be kept, the documentation that must be kept for 7 years, it's vulnerable to the cyber hackers and the attacks. And so definitely speak with your underwriters to see which of their providers are approved.
Yeah, that's why I emphasize the underwriters are checking these things out.
Right.
So you got to fill out the application, and here's an irony. The application and all of the stuff that you send with it has to be mailed into the Department of State. You cannot submit it electronically, so you can send it by regular mail or you can send it by overnight delivery. And the addresses for each of those different methods of delivery are up on the screen. You can get the form by downloading it from the Department of State website, but here it is. So you have to give them personal information. If if your full legal name is something different than the way in which you got your original commission, you need to indicate that. Home address, email address, phone number, commission number, expiration. I will use the following RON service provider. Tell them the name of the platform. And then you confirm all of these things, that you have picked a qualified RON service provider. Number 2, you're including evidence of your bond. 3, evidence of E&O. Here's a copy of my commission. And here's my $10 check for my fee. And if you get terminated as a regular notary, that terminates your online notary status, and you finish the course. Send them that certificate. And voila, 2 or 3 days later, you're an online notary.
Yay.
What else?
Excellent.
Did I make my 15 minutes? Did I make my 15 minutes?
Well done.
I think you have some extra time. So, in short, a couple of things were, I realized that as many people put yes to the answer of, which platform we use, and yes, just to highlight this, speaking with the state last week, they had received 200 applications one day. 125 of those were denied. Majority of them were for this very reason. So, I mean, you can say it lighthearted, but it is something that's been frustrating for the state as well as for that applicant. And then that original certificate, very important. Going through your bonding agents, we understand it's a 3 to 4 week process. So a lot of the stuff doesn't happen overnight. Engaging with the platforms that you're wanting to partner and work with, utilize. We were on a webinar last week. Exercise patience. This is obviously a global pandemic, not just impacting us. So they are getting bombarded from multiple angles. So it's very important that we all stay patient and positive as much as possible with this. Anything from the gallery specific to
I don't see any questions about the process yet.
Yeah.
I see some questions about other things, but I don't see any specific questions about this. But shoot, we'll respond to any messages and questions that we don't get to during this webinar. We'll certainly be able to respond to those afterwards.
Right. Now, I do have a question, someone asking what is FLTA doing to, on the lenders and stuff. This has been a common question. There are very few national lenders. Obviously, Quicken, Thrive, Redfin have all been ones that have kind of come up in conversation. The large banks, the traditional banks, BB&T, SunTrust, Wells Fargo, from what we understand, have not adopted the RON technology, and I know that's been very frustrating for everyone. I do want to express that Alta and MBA are trying to work through this, but these are business decisions at the same time. They're not just federal mandates that you must accept and everything. So there is a process. Again, I know it's been frustrating for everyone, but those conversations are happening. I think the supply and demand factor is really going to play a role in this. It's going to take, one bank to say, aha, let's do it. And then I think we'll start to see other ones follow suit. I don't know if y'all agree with that, but that's kind of what I'm understanding. I know several of them are also trying to develop their own platforms. So there's some of that control aspect that they are working through as organizations.
Scott, there is a question that's been posted. What should the agent do if all RON providers are 2 weeks behind? That is definitely a problem that the industry is dealing with. No one predicted this pandemic. And least of all, the RON service platforms, they are slammed. And they are scrambling to support the industry. They want to service you, they want the business, but the reality is they are behind. Mm-hmm. You might want to reach out to your underwriter to see if anybody in that office can help you with getting through to a particular service provider. It is a problem. I guess what I'm saying is don't take it personally. They're not picking on you. It is a problem.
We'll add to the positive and the comments that Scott's made and just keep it in perspective. There are alternatives to RON. For a very long time, none of us were doing any RON. Plenty of us are still not doing any RON. So when we get to the point about some of the adapting processes for settlement, we'll talk about some of the ways agents have become incredibly creative and flexible.
Right.
I think all of us need to be as flexible as we can with closings. Watching out for fraudsters, being careful and complete, but there are ways we'll talk about that RON may not be the only solution.
Right. So, and along with this, Melissa, you had a couple of platforms on your slides on the FLTA site, flta.org/coronavirus. There's a couple others that are listed as well there that are compiled through the National Notary Association that we've picked up on or kind of trying to track, but there really are. There's only a small handful of them that are out in the marketplace, it seems, but definitely a growing interest in accessibility.
There is a question, Scott. I don't know if we're out of time and need to move on, but do you have to be approved by a RON service provider ahead of submitting the application to the state? There's nothing in the statute that requires that. It just says that you have to tell them what RON service provider you're going to use. So, I'd go ahead and submit your application and designate the one that you plan on using, and then work out the details with that particular platform before you can start conducting online notarizations. Because there's a provision in the law that will allow you to change what provider you use. You can have more than one. So yes, I would go ahead and put the one that you intend to use, even if you haven't finalized the terms of your arrangement with them.
That's good advice. I bet you some of the rejections were putting down multiple or all of the RON providers and putting just one.
No, they were just saying yes. Yes, I intend. No, I don't think that was the problem, Lynn. I think it was they were just saying yes.
All right, so you think we could put down a couple? I'm going to use Notarize and NotaryCam, and that would work. Okay.
I think so.
Excellent. someone had taken the FLTA wrong class. Thank you for taking it. Can you have multiple RON platforms? Can you change providers? If so, must state be
Yes.
notified? Yes.
Yep, we just got it.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
And I think
Yes, they have to be notified within 30 days.
yes. Turnaround time for approval. My conversation last week was that as much as they receive 100 to 200 applications a day, they understand the importance of this and they are pushing same-day turnaround.
I was told late yesterday afternoon, 3 days, no more than 3 days.
Okay. All right.
That's more real. Yeah.
So, but one way to track this is if you go to that Department of State site, you can pull up the Florida approved notaries. And once you see your name up there, and if you're waiting for it to come in the mail, you might see it ahead of time and everything. So after that 2-3 day window, you could definitely track it that way. How about a gap commitment? Gap commitment exclusions. Exclusions lenders are sending out communications that they will not accept exceptions on policies for gap.
I can cover that on behalf of the underwriters. Florida has a statute, 627-7841, that actually requires if a title issuing agent has settled a transaction that that gap is covered unless there's specific knowledge of information or issues that would change that. Our 2006 policies automatically provide gap coverage. In Florida, the way that the gap coverage is typically provided is simply marking through or not including in a pro forma the gap exception that goes with the affirmative coverage in the policy. So for Florida, we've got it a little easier than some other states where they're actually prohibited from providing gap coverage, and they're really in a world of hurt right now with the way the lenders have taken that position.
Got a general response here. Someone has, during this time, completed and submitted their SBA application. So it apparently it does not take as much time as one would think. So there you go. Good info. Online notarization material. It can be found again, flta.org/coronavirus. So I think that can be your main starting point, and then go from there on your links provided. I think most of these team have been
Scott, are you taking back the PowerPoint? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say that again?
Yeah. Take me off. Take me off. Okay.
All right.
Well done.
Excellent. All right. So, adapting business procedures, processes. Marty, what are you hearing in the agent section? What are some practices that are being adapted to?
Well, I'm hearing a great deal of creativity, actually. And I got to say, the agents who I think are handling this best are the ones who see this more as an opportunity than necessarily as a disaster. They've adapted their procedures very quickly, and they do it with both their employees and their customers in mind. So first, with respect to the employees, they responded quickly to see who could be moved to their home environment, who could work from home. They tried very hard to create tasks that could be done at home, even for those people who might otherwise have less to do because of what's going on. So example, receptionists and folks like that who are not needed anymore to greet customers walking in the door can work on projects like the backlog of scanning of old files and stuff like that. So they just gave some thought to how to give their employees a sense of security and how to keep them productive so that they're justifying their paycheck throughout this. Obviously, that's going to help with the SBA loan forgiveness issue, because it's one thing to take an interest-free loan for a little while. If you have to let people go, it's another thing to make it into a grant by keeping everybody employed. Which is really good for the remaining morale of employees. As far as continuing to do business, I've heard a wide variety of stories. I've heard people just moving to pre-closing procedures that involve a lot of electronic signatures on documents. And now you're finally getting a lot of reception among your customers for those types of practices, which maybe before you had, your older customers sort of resisting those things. They wanted to do everything in an old-fashioned way. And now, because of these broader issues, they're suddenly saying, okay, I need this technology. And maybe their family is more available to them by FaceTime or whatever to help them figure that technology out. So that's a great opportunity to move to more advanced practices. Now, obviously, with a real estate closing, there's still some stuff that you've got to do in person. You've got to have an interaction with a notary. You've got to get blue ink signatures with witnesses on your mortgages and your promissory notes. And so we've also had agents who are doing a variety of really creative things to get that done, but get it done in a safe way that makes their customers feel comfortable. We've got, of course, remote notaries who will go to customers, and some of them are still willing to do that in person in the traditional way. Right, mobile notaries. Others, of course, have adapted their own procedures. They will stay in their car and give you a text or a call when they show up at your location. You come out, you show them the driver's license right through the window, they take a photograph of it with their phone, and then you're trading documents in through the car window, and you don't have that opportunity to convey any virus. You're not really breaking quarantine. We have one agent who reported to us that their physical setup is such that they have a breezeway and their customers can actually come in, sit at a table. There will be a pen on the table that's been used before and that the customer can take with them when they leave. And what a great way to get your customers to hang on to your pens that are branded that you're using for marketing, right? And then they've got a window where, just like with the mobile notaries in the car, the borrower gets up, holds their driver's license against the window, a photograph is taken of it from the other side, and they have like advanced copies of documents out on the table so the borrowers can actually sign those documents right there. Witnesses are looking on through a glass window, which is perfectly acceptable. And then you just kind of pass the documents back and forth the same way we all used to do at our banks with the little, suction container that sends stuff back and forth. So it's kind of old school that way. And I think the customers really appreciate that type of care. I have heard, for example, I'll get on teleconferences with relatives and we trade stories back and forth about how our grocery stores are doing. Publix is doing a wonderful job keeping their stores clean, supplying masks, having their employees use rubber gloves. They've laid tape down on the ground to show how, where 6 feet is, so you can stand back with your cart, and, they have Purell up on the thing. And those kinds of stories about which businesses are creatively adapting, those are great marketing opportunities, and they're going all around. So imagine one of your customers getting on the phone with their relatives around town and saying, wow, I can't believe it. I was expecting my closing to be put off. I didn't think I could move into the new place, but lo and behold, XYZ title did this for me. And it was wonderful. What a great experience. And that's advertising for you guys. With respect to litigation on that side, if you wind up finding yourself in that unfortunate position, I can tell you that the courts and the clerks remain wide open. If you need to file a lawsuit, record a lis pendens. It's no more difficult now than it has been in the recent past. Florida's e-filing portal allows everything to go directly to the clerks and the courts. Your lawyers can do that from their laptop at home if they're not coming into their office. And judges are continuing, despite the orders out there, to have hearings via video conference. We just had an evidentiary hearing where we had a witness sworn in by the judge. The court reporter was in an entirely different location, and the witness gave testimony over video conference. So you can still do that.
Marty, that's super important. Hopefully our members are not so much involved in litigation themselves.
I hope so too.
We've got plenty of chains of title that have either litigation or necessary court orders in order to clear marketable title. And you're absolutely right. Just this past Friday, and Miami-Dade is one of the county clerks and courts that has been hit hardest and has been shut down. And yet on Friday, very, very quickly, surprisingly so, an online bench trial, an immediate order, and they're able to close the title transaction. So that's great update and insight.
Right.
Just about the only thing they can't do is jury trials. But the reason I raise this, I hope none of the agents get involved in litigation while this is going on. But I do think that one of the downsides of this situation is you're going to have more and more as people go out of work. Your computer specialists and your criminal kids are going to go to work trying to scam you, and they're stuck at home with nothing but their computers to do it with. So we're going to see more and more attempts to, give you the wrong wiring directions. They're going to spoof your customers' email addresses and spoof even their phone numbers. So you'll get a call. You'll look at your phone system, it will look like the phone number your customer gave you. So you have someone calling you who's been monitoring the emails you send to your customer, who says to you, hey, I need to, change the wiring instruction. I'm the seller, I need my proceeds sent here instead of there. And if you're not proactive in double checking, like for example, in that situation, you can no longer rely on that incoming phone number. What you need to do is say, okay, thank you very much. We're going to hang up now. I'm going to send you an email, and then I'm going to give you a telephone call. And you actively dial out to that borrower's or the seller's original number that they gave you, because so far they can't intercept it if it's outgoing from your system. So be the one to make that call.
Marty, that's such important advice too, because with everyone doing social distancing and the kind of things that are happening, more people are online. It's not us as the title industry that this is surprising to. I mean, Nancy's convention. Think about the amount of cybersecurity and the things we talked about, but it's the customers. It's the people that, it's the realtor that would normally drop off the contract is now going to email it, not using secure email. And if somebody's monitoring those emails, they've got all the details to that transaction to spearfish and trick people into and steal their money. So now is absolutely a time where we have to realize, hey, we're doing some things we've never done before. Look at this video conferencing that we're on right now. I've never, I've done webinars. I've never shown my face. It's a little, well, we'll leave it at that. It's fun. We're all wearing clothes. I think we did all right.
And
but we're not used to it.
Here's if you can see this, here's a picture of someone just sent me. They put, it looks like a plexiglass or some type of glass on their conference table to
great.
separate.
That's great.
And just like we talked about getting the documentation now, even though it may not be absolutely necessary, these kinds of things we're talking about, I think it's fair to say social distancing and some of the different ways that we're all going to interact with each other remotely and online. These are going to be permanent changes. So it's worth the investment and the strategy and the investment now to protect our people and to serve our customers.
Agreed. So just on the cybersecurity issue, to kind of put a pin in it finally, remember, no substitute for outgoing phone calls from your office. If you can, FaceTime your borrowers and compare it to whatever existing information you have or whatever you can find online about what that borrower looks like, because it's awfully hard to spoof somebody's face. But if you do run into a problem, remember, the FBI is still open for business. They're the first place you call if there's a misdirected wire, because they have systems to retrieve a misdirected wire, and they only work in those first few critical days, 48 hours, 72 hours. But again, the courts are open for business as well. So if you run into a problem like that, you're not out of luck.
Yeah, I see 3.gov is the FBI's link on that. A couple of things here. Well, first off, Nancy, what are you doing in your office?
We had our first drive-through closing this morning. Amanda and Lena went to the office, and the seller, it was one seller out of three, came in early and called Amanda, the office, and she said, we'll be out, and would you like a pair of gloves to go with your pen? And he said, yes, please. So, and he had already had a couple of these. So it went very smoothly, and he was very happy. And so they went outside and had a closing.
Excellent, excellent. So someone's
we were joking yesterday on the call about it'd be nice, advertising for folks to start giving advertised face masks.
Right, right. So actually this question's come up a couple times now, is the consumers, the folks that are coming to close to sign the documents, are they able to travel to and from your agencies? Under the guidance or the executive order, as long as they are traveling to and from an essential business, your agency being an essential business, then they are okay and is acceptable. One of the other suggestions was, do they need to have a letter? It might not be a bad idea to say, hey, I'm going to, such and such closing, such and such time and location, just as a backup. I think, Melissa, you might have said it earlier, where, they're not wanting to necessarily just arrest people to arrest people. That's obviously going to take up a lot of bandwidth and tax dollars on unnecessary means. But just to have those kinds of checks and balances might be something to provide your consumer. Another thing is, when we have those essential signers at the table, we normally have maybe the realtor or the broker or the lender participate. And obviously, that's discouraged to have non-essential signers or transactors attend. One way to bring them in might be through a Zoom call or a Skype, a FaceTime. That way they're virtually there. It's not the same feeling and takeaway, but it's still a way for them to participate. And then lastly, obviously, these platforms, this GoToWebinar, Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, those are not platforms for remote online notary. We cannot say it enough. They do not provide the authentication, the verification processes that you must abide by when you're an online notary.
Parties to transactions. That's an important point to keep in mind if you're dealing with other jurisdictions, like up in New York, where the governor made an extraordinary executive order that does apply to notarizations, but only when everybody and everything is New York. Right. Trying to take that kind of executive order and make it consistent with Florida statutes and what we do in here, very problematic. So stick to Florida.
Exactly.
And one other thing, don't forget to reach out, call, Zoom. The customers, they need to feel that we are in control, we have this, and that's very important, and we are getting great feedback from realtors, customers about that.
Yeah, Scott, I know we're out of time, but I did have just a few very short comments to make on behalf of underwriters. Do we have time to provide that, or?
Yeah, please.
All right. Well, first, just in general, I want everybody to know that the title industry and business in Florida has been strong. In fact, pleasantly, surprisingly so. In residential, we all know the refis and the demand that the low interest rates have created, but in fact, sales of residential properties have remained very strong in Florida. We'll see that that continues or not, but at least up until this moment, very encouraging. Commercial has been more lumpy. Obviously, there's certain industries that have really been hit, hotels, hospitality. There are REITs and sources, lenders that have simply said, until the coronavirus has a little more visibility and certainty, we're not going to lend. So there's been an impact on the commercial side. But that said, there's plenty of significant commercial deals that are continuing to close, and we're transacting business. As far as general issues, we've already covered many of them. The biggest topics that all underwriters are working with our agents on, of course, Ron, the gap risk that we talked about. In Florida, it's less about the recorders, and it's more about perhaps inaccessibility to other government services, whether it's the payoffs or the municipal liens. And so there, speak to your underwriters, see what, if you have a transaction that's affected by that, what may be available, whether it's an indemnity or otherwise, to be practical and collaborative and get deals done. For all of you that are handling deals, think in terms, unfortunately, of unusual risks that maybe weren't on our radar previously. Mechanics liens now, mechanics lien projects, both in terms of completing them, even having the workers out in the supply chains that are happening. And oftentimes with mechanics liens, there's credit underwriting that is happening as far as the source of funds and where you're going with that. So mechanics lien projects in Florida, I think everyone has to do in a thoughtful way, looking at title transactions with borrowers in financial distress or default. Bankruptcy is going to be something that folks have to consider and think about, and just be careful out there. But overall, I've never been more proud of our association or our industry. I think we're doing an incredible job, and very excited about what we're doing and the silver linings that'll come from this.
Yeah, there's a lot of takeaways here. Here was another one, folks doing a drive-by.
All right.
Or curbside closing.
Drive-through. We're calling them drive-throughs, I think.
Yeah, I guess drive-through is better. Touche. So, well, excellent. Obviously, there's a lot of things happen, a lot of adapting. Any last words from our astute panelists here?
Well, I want to say, as president, for all of us on this panel today, that we're so very proud of you all. It takes all of us to embrace this change, and we're such a resilient industry, and together we can get through this and we can thrive again.
Absolutely. Well done.
Yeah.
Stay safe, everybody.
Yes.
Well said. We're very resilient, and we will power through. But know that we're here. If you have questions and everything, reach out to us. We've reached a lot of counties, municipalities along the way the past couple of weeks, and we are a team, and we are in this together.
Stay positive.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank y'all. Be safe.
Yeah. Have a great day.